This lesson is for a transitional kindergarten lesson. It's called Line, and they're gonna have learned about different kinds of lines: straight lines, curved lines, zigzag lines, thick lines, thin lines, short lines, all of that. So they're gonna look at some art that goes with that, and then they're gonna make their own art using those lines. So all you need for this one is a sheet of paper. I have cardstock here. You don't have to use cardstock. They're gonna be watercoloring. And sometimes the younger kids, they tend to use a lot of water. So construction paper would be fine, but if you wanted it to be a little bit more sturdy, you could use cardstock. It's really up to you and what you have available. So it's a pretty basic project. They are mostly 4 and some 5-year-olds. So they are young. So the simpler we can keep it, the better. So they're gonna have learned about all these lines, and what you're gonna have them do is make sure they put their paper tall. Sometimes their teachers have a way that they tell them, you know, hot dog, hamburger. There's all these funny ways that they teach them. I believe this is hamburger. I think this is hot dog. Anyway, you can ask the teacher the best way to remind them that they want their paper to be tall in front of them. And then they're going to think of the lines that they've talked about in the lesson, and they are going to draw multiple lines across their paper, just going across and down. And what they're going to do it with an oil pastel or a crayon. It's really whatever your supply closet has. I know my supply closet has oil pastels for the older grades, and then they have some little chunkier ones with less colors for the younger grades. But a crayon would work fine too. Black is the best, but I know sometimes black crayons and black oil pastels can be hard to come by. So if they all have a black crayon, that's great. If not, you could use another dark color, blue, green. It really doesn't matter. It's really up to you. So all they're gonna do is, and I would really show them how to do this, not just show them your example. Like I have my example right here. You could show them the example, but I would even demonstrate doing a couple lines just so they get the idea. So their paper is tall, and then they are going to do different lines across their paper. So I could do just a straight thin line, and then a zigzag line. So maybe show them a couple lines just so they get the idea. And you can even show them it can be something that goes across the paper like this, like they're doing spiral lines that go across. Basically any type of line, thick, thin, short, and they're just gonna do a few of these across the paper. And theirs will probably not be straight across the paper. They'll be crooked, but that's fine. That kind of, it'll just add a little bit more personality. So I'm just gonna keep adding some lines on across the paper. Okay, so I have all of my lines across the paper, and now they're gonna fill in all the spaces between the lines with watercolor. This would be a good time to talk to them really quickly about how to use the watercolors. Often with the younger kids, they do one of two things. They use way too much water or not enough water. So you could do a little demonstration about just kind of saying, hey, you know, dip your paintbrush in the water. Let's see, I'll move it over. Brush your paintbrush off and then put some water in the color that you're gonna use. And then you can show them how the paint should spread really nice and smooth. If it's hard to spread, then that means you could even show them, like if your brush is really dry and you get color, if it's spreading like that and not really like this and you could show them that means that their brush is not wet enough. And if the color barely shows up, that probably means it's too wet. So this is a really good time to show them that. Another thing that I like to remind them is every time they switch colors, they need to rinse off their brush. It's just a good lesson to learn. So I would show that to them, and I've even before given them the watercolors, and often it's just the 8 watercolors, not these 16, and even told them if they can remember to wash off their brush and bring me their watercolors looking really nice and clean, that they'll get a sticker. It seems silly, but it really does help remind them to use their watercolors correctly. The other thing that I like to do is I actually like to pop out the black and the brown. With the younger kids, once they use the black and the brown, their entire painting becomes black and brown. So most of the watercolors, you can just pop them out. So I will often just pop them out so they're watercolor, they don't have black and brown at all. And then when we're done, I just pop them back in. So you can just remind them, or you can say, please, no black and brown. But something about those kindergarten boys or those TK boys, they cannot stay away from the black and brown. So that's just a hint that I like to use, and kind of some ideas about using your art lesson to give them just some basic tips on how to use the materials correctly. Another thing is I would make sure to give them not too small of a brush. If you give them those real tiny brushes that often come with the set, they'll get really frustrated trying to fill in all this space. So I would make sure to give them a brush no smaller than this. In fact, even bigger than this is totally fine, because they're gonna go outside the lines. They're not gonna be super precise, and that is just fine because they're little guys. So I'm just gonna keep painting, filling in all the space, and they can do it however they want, whatever colors they want. It's totally up to them. So that is the finished product for the kindergarten, or the transitional kindergarten line lesson. The great thing about the crayons or the oil pastels is no matter how much paint they put on it, it repels the watercolor. So they're still gonna end up with these nice lines that really stick out.